Welcome to the Athletics Week in Football, brought to you by BOYLE Sports. It's been a massive transfer window. Over $3 billion spent by the Premier League, and various teams have also broken records. But which moves will define the season? JJ, John, let's do this. We have to start with Liverpool, surely. And Alexander Isak finally gets the move he wants. Big money, definitely an amazing striker. But I'm still thinking, how on earth a player like that is going to fit into this team, especially with Eberechi already?
Well, how do you get Isak and Eberechi in the same team? I'm going to try and work it out. Okay. You could play them both together in a sort of 4-2-4 thing, but then there are repercussions of what happens if you do this. There are knock-on effects. So, for instance, if you play 4-2-4, you need some width. Salah wants to play inside, but if you play him wide like this, like a winger, you don't get the most out of him. Perhaps you can come inside and help them out when they get to like a final third, bit like here, and you can combine with Eberechi. And then you could push Frimpong up here, so you get some width to allow that sort of situation with the defenders. But then also you've got Florian Wirtz over here on the left. And he doesn't want to play on the left. A lot of his touches were on the left for Leverkusen, but that was oftentimes because they played with a back three with wing back, so he'd have an overlapper as well. So let's give him the freedom to move inside and push Kerkez up. Now you start to see where the problem is, because Liverpool's rest defence here is horrible. There's too much space all over the pitch. So perhaps what you want to do is do something that Slot's talked about with the fullbacks, is that only one can go forward at one time. So it's about getting the timing right. So if you have Kerkez staying more like this with a 3 and a 2 behind him, Wirtz still kind of has to stay wide. Maybe he can come inside a little bit and Isak can rotate with him. But Isak has said he doesn't like playing off the left. He can go there and he does move an awful lot around. There's some numbers on the screen right now that show you where he played for Newcastle over the last 2 seasons. Sometimes goes left, but really he wants to play to the middle, so you can do that. What's actually probably going to happen is that you play Eberechi at certain games and you play Isak at certain games. Isak has a history of being injured quite a lot. Yeah. And he also goes through hot and cold streaks of form, as you can see from his expected goals and goals over the last few seasons, well, last season specifically. Whereas Eberechi, in only his first full season really, Eintracht Frankfurt, quite consistent. That's kind of what you want to see. So what you might see is that they rotate with each other to keep one fresh and one fit and one in form and one not. And Eberechi excels against teams where he can play in transition in behind. Isak can score goals out of nowhere against a deep block. So you probably have that. But everything they do, like whoever they play, they have to be aware of this rest defence situation that we talked about before in previous episodes. But also there's one more thing I've noted from this, like Gakpo's not there, there's one thing, he's been really good so far. Also Szoboszlai is not in the team if you play this. So there's loads of different knock-on effects. Who plays Liverpool in what game? It might be that Slot adjusts it depending on opponent, who he thinks is going to be the best one there. I'd imagine Isak gets the start because he's the superstar in the Premier League and the all-time record.
Yeah, they've paid a lot of money for him.
Yeah, that's what you get. So you can play them together, but everything is knock-on effects. So like Salah's not as effective, Wirtz is not going to get in the positions that he wants unless you time it perfectly with the overlapping run from Kerkez, unless you time it perfectly with the overlapping run from Frimpong. But all of these are going to give them situations we've seen in the past where they can be countered, and that is dangerous when you're going all-out attack.
Well, but I mean, come on. To even think about Eberechi and Isak as your choices. Liverpool fans, you are spoilt. We have to talk about someone else, a player I've been waiting to come to the Premier League for a while, John. Xavi Simons. Of course, Spurs missed out on Morgan Gibbs-White. They also missed out on Eze, no shade there. But this player excites me a little bit. Should Spurs fans be excited too?
Yeah, I think so, especially after the game they had at the weekend where they got Andoni Iraola'd by Bournemouth. And it's maybe worth us having a look at what happened in that game, because I think it really gives us a good sense of why someone like Xavi Simons is going to be important for them. So let's just have a look. This is Spurs in build-up, so Spurs going from left to right here. And what was happening is that it was very clear that Bournemouth wanted to force Spurs onto their left-hand side. So what we saw was Evan Nielsen sort of sitting across on Romero, forcing the pass into Van de Ven here. This is a very inviting pass. But as soon as that happens, then what you get from Bournemouth is the series of jumps with players moving up the field. And as you can see now, Van de Ven is faced with a situation where on his side of the field, everyone is basically player for player. If you had a good passer here like Christian Romero, as we said, what you might say is, well, okay, now they've gone player to player in the back line, there's space in behind, I can find these balls in behind and maybe cause problems there. Van de Ven isn't that kind of player. Very good ball carrier, and maybe they could have used that a little bit more, but essentially what was ending up happening is that Spurs were then being forced into playing these risky passes, the ball was turning over and Bournemouth were basically able to control the game. Now, one way of providing a solution here could be having one of your forwards dropping in to actually help out in the build-up phase, because what happens then is you create this tension for the centre-back in particular. So let's say this is Richarlison and he drops in. This is Bafodé Diakite. He has two options. He can either follow all the way through, and what you're doing then is opening up even more space now for that ball in behind, which is, I guess, a risk. The other thing you could do then is stay deeper and prevent that from being an issue, but now you've got a free player in your build-up. And this is something we've seen from Thomas Frank before, because I've actually got a play sequence here showing how Mikkel Damsgaard plays that kind of role for Brentford. So this is a game against Leicester, and we can see it's exactly the same sort of situation I've just talked through on the board. The Leicester players are actually player for player up against the Brentford players. This is about Fass, who's the centre-back. This is Damsgaard. Now, Damsgaard's going to drop right out of the play. Fass is going to follow him to a certain point, but then once he's over the halfway line, he's like, I shouldn't be this far, and drops back in. So on the next screen, we can see this is Wout Fass, much deeper, and here's Damsgaard. He's created a free player, and now Brentford are able to pick the ball up. Damsgaard can carry the ball forward unopposed, and then ahead of the play, we've got the two Brentford, like the forward and the wing back on that side, doing these double movements that Thomas Frank likes in order to create space. Damsgaard can play the ball in to Kevin Schade here, who can then play a dangerous ball across the goal to Wissa, who ends up scoring. And so what Thomas Frank wants from his 10s then is the ability to receive the ball between the lines and the ability to carry and then make these dangerous passes once they've dropped in to help out. So actually, if we look at those two metrics, we've got a really useful metric here from The Athletic. We can see Mikkel Damsgaard is there, right? Lots of dangerous passes coming from him, and also the ability to receive the ball between the lines. Interestingly enough, here's Xavi Simons highlighted. So he's in that kind of ballpark as well. And then we've got other players that Spurs have been linked with this
don't
window.
do that to them now, John.
Nico Paz, Morgan Gibbs-White. I don't think Eze's on here, but it's very clear that they've been going for a profile of player who can do this, dropping in, helping out with build-up. So the big question is, how well is Xavi Simons going to be able to do that for Spurs? So I've just got a few examples of that happening. This is a game where RB Leipzig played at the beginning of this season against Bayern Munich. They ended up losing 6-0, but it's a good example, I think, because one, it's a very high level of team, so we're getting a good idea of how well Simons might fit in the Premier League. But also, Bayern like to go player for player across the field, and so he's going to be facing these aggressive man-to-man systems, and we can see how he's going to deal with it. So this is a really nice sequence of play very early on in the game, and we can see Simons has dropped right in. You can see the Bayern players are already trying to go player for player, but what ends up happening here is Kimmich actually sees the Leipzig player moving off Simons, and he thinks, well, I'll follow the other player, and Gnabry, who's coming across here, is going to go man-to-man on Simons. So that's roughly what happens here. But actually, because the ball goes back to the centre-back, Gnabry jumps across onto the centre-back, and what Simons has done now is created space, right? So it's exactly what we're talking about before, which is having these number 10s who can drop in, can create space in build-up. He's able to receive the ball and turn, and then he moves the ball on quite nicely here. So really nice example of that happening against a team like Bayern. But we've got a few examples as well of other things. So in this situation, this is in the build-up from a goal kick. Simons is here and he's basically playing as a pivot player. So he's just going to receive the ball. So in this situation, he drops off, creates separation for himself from his marker. In this instance, all he can do is just play the ball back to the centre-back. But again, he's in that sort of space where he can get involved in deep build-up stuff. He can help his team move the ball, create free players on the field as well. So yeah, he just plays this pass straight back. But it's kind of interesting because there's a few examples of this sort of happening when he's under a lot of pressure, and he isn't the sort of player who's going to be able to turn out of pressure like that. Now, it's a very hard thing to do, but it's going to be something that if he shows that he has the ability to do that, he'll be a perfect player for Spurs in this sort of situation. Here's another example. So again, you can see he's dropped off. He's managed to create space between himself and Kimmich, and the ball comes to him. But in this situation, this is really nice. This is what you want, right? You've created a free player. He's got options either side of him, but actually takes a slightly poor touch, and it sort of rolls off his heel and starts going backwards. So in the end, he then has to play it back. That sort of got me thinking, what does this tell us about him? There's a few things, I think, both ways, one of which is, and there's a few examples of this happening, just a lack of maybe technical sharpness. Okay. It's worth saying that this is something that is happening against Bayern Munich, who are going to be putting him under as much pressure as any team in the Premier League. This is also the first game of the season, so maybe a little bit of lacking at match sharpness. But these are the situations where, the difference between that pass and the other two passes we had highlighted is the difference between you actually generating a dangerous transitional moment artificially and then you having to recycle possession as well. So something to keep in mind. But there are some nice examples in this game as well of him doing exactly that, right? So again here, he's found the space, dropped off his player, he's able to receive the ball, and you can see already the pass through the lines of pressure here. He plays that pass, and then what we end up with is a very similar situation to what we saw from the Brentford game before, right, where the ball is now moving forward. You can find that ball in behind, and you end up with the fullback here actually in behind the opposition defence. So lots of good examples here that against a team like Bayern Munich, we're seeing the sorts of things that Thomas Frank wants to see from his number 10. It's also worth saying that Xavi Simons isn't just a passer of the ball, he is a carrier with the ball as well. I think this Viz on this side in particular on the left, showing the chances created from picking the ball up in deeper areas and carrying it forward is important as well. Again, maybe some questions I have about physicality here, because I think Simons has a really good quick burst of pace. I think he's really good press resistance, but I think once you get him into these sort of longer distance dribbles and carries, he doesn't have the physicality to generate separation from his marker, and so sometimes he gets caught up a lot. Now the good thing is that he's a very technical player, so he often wins fouls in those situations. But again, it'll be interesting to see how he fits into the Premier League from a physical point of view there as well. But the most important thing I think for Spurs fans is that he's doing exactly what it is that Thomas Frank wants from a number 10, because not only have we got the sorts of things that you expect from a number 10, right? We've got creative threat here, goal threat here. So he's creating goals, he's providing goals, but also we can see like up here, carry progression, 97th percentile. This is a player who likes to get the ball, likes to carry it forward, but he also has the ability to make those passes forward as well. I think he's going to be a really important player for Thomas Frank precisely for these connective reasons that we talked about. The issues that Spurs had against Bournemouth was that they couldn't move the ball from their build-up unit to their attacking unit. A player like Simons, I think, will help them solve that problem.
Yeah, love it, love it. Great signing, Spurs. Now let's go to the other side of North London. Eberechi Eze, finally an Arsenal player. Word has it that he actually called Mikel Arteta to go to Arsenal. Sorry, Spurs. But the real talk is, this is a player I feel Arsenal need, JJ. Clearly an important signing for Mikel Arteta.
Yes, well, I love Eberechi Eze, and I think it could be one of the best transfers, the most important ones that happened this entire summer, the entire season. And I'm going to try and show you why, which is why I am here after all. So here is some attacking carries for Arsenal by Gabriel Martinelli. You can see one's leading to a chance, he's always on the left, one's leading to a shot, he's mostly in the left half space. Whereas Eberechi Eze tends to be like through the middle more. So people think he's like a number 10, so therefore he can't stay wide. But I disagree, I think you're wrong.
Tell us why.
So here is Gabriel Martinelli receiving the ball on the left-hand side. And I like Martinelli as a player, but I think he's been a little bit, for want of a better word, Grealished. And it's to do with how Arsenal play, because he's good at doing that. So this is where you might have seen Grealish pick up the ball from Man City or whatever in the past, but Martinelli receives it on the left for Arsenal. And what I keep seeing with Martinelli is he gets the ball, he gains a little bit of territory, he keeps going, he goes this far, not too far, he drags players back, allows people to get back into the game, and then he passes back and nothing really happens, you see. This is what he's been doing. But here, when he's got a chance to burst away, you think he's really, really fast, but he's not that fast. He gets caught up by Van Dijk here. But he goes, he runs, he always on the left-hand side, he always gets pushed out to the left-hand side, he keeps going, he gets to a dangerous position and he stops and he passes back. And so what he's doing here, I think, is what Arteta wants him to do is to gain territory and gain position. So it's positional play. If you can hold the left width, everyone else can move forward. You've got a more sustainable way of creating chances, and it's repeatable. That's kind of what you want. However, you can pretty much just show him wide left, and that's what lots of defenders do every single time because he's not really got a left foot. So on the counter-attack here, he's charging into space, end-to-end game, this Liverpool-Arsenal game. This is the last one that happened. The other ones were earlier examples. And all you got to do is show him onto his left, Gyökeres gets in his way, Konate just shows him wide, just blocks off the middle. He's not going to go that way anyway. He doesn't really get shots away when he does. And he shows him all the way to the line and it goes out of play. I'm not even sure what that happens there. So it's not that great. And you can see the majority of his runs are on the outside. So he's playing like a winger, but he's right-footed. And I think really he wants to be an inside forward who plays inside. But he just can't really do it. He doesn't produce enough. He does score, he does assist, but I think Arsenal can do better. And I think they have in Eberechi Eze. Because what we've got with Martinelli, you can see it's all like carries and attacking touches, not really much in the way of passes in his FBref profile, but crucially his take-ons. So Eze not only has more take-ons, but he's far more successful with them. But also Eze has more goals and assists combined from a team battling relegation compared to Martinelli, who's finishing second and pushing for the title. So when we look at what Eze does, well, straight away, like he can play wide left. He came on and played wide left for Arsenal in this game, and I think he'll be dangerous. So we can get Eze, even from the still shot, and even though I know what's coming next, I'm not sure which way he's going to go here. The way he disguises every movement is like next level. He's top level, Eze. So when he gets here, I don't know which way he's going to go. So Szoboszlai's trying to show him maybe down the line, but you can tell his weight's going to go this way, so he might go inside. Doesn't matter, he goes past him. And he manages to push it inside. And if he can get on the back of this 1-2, if Odegaard can find him, that's an almost certain goal. So here's another example of the same thing. So Martinelli earlier, driving with a counter-attack, it breaks down, you show him left, and nothing happens. Eze for Crystal Palace. Bursts away from the same position. Here he goes. But what Eze can do that Martinelli can't is play this sort of a pass. And he can thread this in, and that sends Palace straight through. It's a brilliant ball, the kind of thing that only great players can do. And the ball's wide right. So I think it's Sarr on the right-hand side who then cuts it back to Eze, who runs in to score, because Eze can do that sort of thing. But the final thing I can show you that Eze can do, and this is why I think it'll be so important to Arsenal, is when they're playing against teams who are blocking them in, and Arsenal are slow and controlled, that's what they do. And they squeeze opponents in, need someone to do a bit of magic. Here's Eze chasing a long pass out to the wide area. And he gets to it first. Now Szoboszlai comes towards him. I think what happens here with Martinelli, for example, is he would face the defender up. They maybe have to go back, they keep position, they build the attack and do what they normally do. But Eze pulls him in, disguises, flicks it past him, gets away into the box. And so what you get with Eze is someone who can turn a moment into something good and create the sort of chances that Arsenal need to turn these boring, dull games where they've got control and nothing's happening into something. They have it with Saka on the right-hand side, and probably Madueke as well. But Eze makes them just so much more threatening from that left-hand side. It takes away even the worry about who should play up front through the middle for them, because they've got goals and assists and chances created from this wide area now with a magic man.
I love that. He's a magic man. You can tell I'm excited by this one.
You can pretty much predict what Arsenal will do most times, but not with Eze.
Not with Eze. Listen wisely to this man. He knows what he's talking about. Right, another team that finally got the strikers that they wanted, Newcastle United. Here's Sam Tighe with more.
Welcome to What's Changed, presented by BOYLE Sports with me, Sam Tighe. Life after Alexander Isak will look very different for Newcastle United. They've signed 2 forwards to replace him, but neither do exactly what Isak does. So, what will change and how will Newcastle evolve? For 3 years, Newcastle played with a lone, complete forward in Isak. He made a variety of runs, in behind, pulling wide, or dropping off, and of course scored loads of goals. But their new forwards are different. Wissa is fast and will run in behind, while Voltemade may be very tall, but he's more of a number 10 than a target man. In order to play them together, Eddie Howe may need to tweak the shape of this Newcastle team. His typical 4-3-3 formation does not utilise a number 10 or second striker. To play with one, he'd have to sacrifice a midfielder. In this situation, Tonali and Bruno would form a strong double pivot, Wissa would make stretching runs, and Voltemade would float in between. Howe hasn't used this shape consistently since his time at Bournemouth, but with these signings, we might see it again very soon.
Thanks, Sam. The return of the little man, big man combo is back. Love that. Right, Manchester City. This one's interesting because I thought James Trafford was brought into Manchester City to be their starting number 1 keeper. But all of a sudden, transfer deadline day, they've gone for a great saving, Champions League winning, some might say not great with his feet, Gianluigi Donnarumma. Doesn't feel like a Guardiola signing, if I'm honest, John, but is there some logic to it?
Yeah, well, this is the big question, isn't it? I think there's a lot of things about this signing that don't make sense if we look across the history of what Pep Guardiola has done with goalkeepers. You can go back to his time when he first arrived at Manchester City in 2016, and there was big questions about Joe Hart, for example, who I think very similar sort of goalkeeper profile to Donnarumma, which raises the question why he might then want to get rid of one of the best ball-playing goalkeepers in the world in Ederson and bring in Gianluigi Donnarumma. So there's been a lot of arguments made about the changing goalkeeper meta potentially that's happening at the moment. So for example, Opta, the analyst, put out an article on Donnarumma to try and look at why that Pep might have gone for a goalkeeper like this. And I've got some of the viz from that here, and it's kind of interesting to see what's going on. So this is looking specifically at goal kicks. So if we look through history, this is from 16-17 when Guardiola arrived at Manchester City, and what we can see is that when he starts off, the Premier League goalkeepers are often kicking the ball long. So most of the kicks are going into the opposition half. And we can see a massive decline. One catalyst for that is the rule change to goal kicks, where you can now play passes into your own area. But as we see, the number of goal kicks ending in the attacking half drops to around 40% by last season. Right. And then, as they're showing, the number has slightly jumped a little bit here this season. Now, it's worth caveating that's just a tiny sample size, so it could just be noise. But there are some suggestions that, we might be seeing some kind of change, and I'll go into the tactics of that after we have a look at this viz, because this viz just shows you basically the opposite way around, but we're looking at pass completion now. So as soon as goalkeepers are being expected to play the ball in build-up more, then the need for them to have higher pass completion goes up as well. And again, you can see a slight drop-off in the current season with all of those caveats that we've talked about. But the question is, why might that be happening, and what impact might that have on the goalkeepers that you choose to use? So I'm actually going to go back to the board we used for Spurs versus Bournemouth, right? Because what we talked about with that was that what teams are having to face now is opponents going player to player. When the goalkeeper has the ball, the temptation now is, well, because they've had to throw players forward, you end up with these 1v1 matchups against the back line. It's now much more tempting to go direct into space behind. So that's why we're starting to see, I think, goalkeepers going longer from goal kicks now, because there's more inducement to go long. It's not all about just generating settled possession deep in your own half. And I think it's also worth saying, again, tactical diversity is a really important thing. If you're doing the same thing all the time, if you're just building up from deep, opponents are just going to be like, well, they're always building up from deep. So what we'll do is we'll set up to stop them from being able to do that. If you've got a team like Man City, who have the ability with Ederson to go long, and we saw this happen a lot last season. I think the game against Chelsea, the second game that City played against Chelsea, City were able to isolate Erling Haaland against Trevor Chalobah a lot of times, and we just saw Ederson playing the ball long into them, and that resulted in a goal for them. So having that tactical diversity, the ability to go long or go short, is really important. The other thing to say, I think, is that the data that the Opta analysts are showing is just goal kick data, right? One of the things I think that people are assuming here is that as soon as your goalkeeper is starting to go long more often, then it faces any need for them to be good on the ball, which is, I think, wrong for two reasons. One of which is that, as we've just said, the best ball-playing goalkeeper in the world was Ederson. He was fantastic in those situations where he had to make those long passes. So if this was simply about, well, we're just going to be going long more often, so we don't need a good build-up goalkeeper, why get rid of Ederson in the first place? The other thing is that I think people assume that if you're just going to go long, you're not going to think about build-up at all. And the idea is just, well, we'll get the ball in behind as soon as possible. But one of the things that we saw from Liverpool versus Arsenal at the weekend was that Liverpool in the first half were in the same sort of situation that Spurs were in against Bournemouth. They couldn't get the ball out into situations where they could play these passes effectively into wide areas. And so in the second half, Arne Slot changes things up, creates a lot more space for his team in build-up. And as a result, Liverpool are able to get settled possession from where they can then play their longer progressive passes. And I think that's really interesting, because what that suggests is that if you're going to go longer, it might actually require you to be just as good as a goalkeeper in build-up to be able to generate those situations where you're creating space for yourself. And I think this shows up in the data if we look at what Manchester City have been doing over the last few seasons. Now, it's worth saying there's a little bit of noise involved with this, because what I've done is I've taken the touches that Manchester City players are getting in each third and then working out what percentage of the touches are taken per third, right? So we've got the midfield third is the red line here, so you can see it's much higher for Manchester City, because what they want to do is they want to play through the thirds to get to goal. And then we've got the final third touches in orange here, and then the defensive third touches in blue. And what we see through Pep Guardiola's time at Manchester City is that the percentage of touches that they take in the midfield third is gradually reducing. I think part of that is because teams are going much more player to player, and so it's much harder to do the positional play stuff, but get the ball through the lines of pressure that Guardiola was doing when he first arrived. What that means is that a lot of that percentage of touches have to be taken up in other areas, right? And unsurprisingly, what we're starting to see is final third touches going up for Manchester City. In part, that's because they're able to control the ball in those kind of areas. But I think what we're also seeing is that they're bypassing the midfield a little bit more. Now, that might make you think, well, if they're bypassing the midfield a bit more, then they're going to have fewer touches in the defensive there. But that's not the case. What we can see is, as time has gone by, City have taken a higher percentage of their touches in the first third in build-up. What this tells me, I think, is that I don't think you can say simply, well, the goalkeeper meta is changing. Teams are going long more for particularly goal kicks, but in build-up as well, we're seeing teams wanting to go direct a little bit more. Therefore, it's less important for your goalkeeper to be a good build-up player, because I think, as we said, you're actually probably going to end up taking more touches in the defensive third because you have to set up these scenarios where you're able to play those progressive passes as efficiently as possible. So I think the big reason has probably then got to go to the shot stopping side of things, City are a little bit more open in transition than they have been. So maybe the idea is if we bring in a goalkeeper who is a brilliant shot stopper, that should maybe balance out the sort of goals scored versus goals against in favour of Pep Guardiola's tactical approach.
Yeah, and a Guardiola tip as well. City haven't started the season that well. Is this still him trying to figure out how on earth this City team work well?
Yeah, I think so. And it may be the case that he thinks that he can use Donnarumma in a slightly different way in build-up. So maybe the data doesn't really represent how things will be in the future. But I also do think that however it sort of comes out in the wash, that goalkeeper is still going to have a huge responsibility of helping his team control the ball well enough to progress the ball however they choose to do it.
Okay. JJ, let's bring some romance back into football. The lovely locks of Jack Grealish is at Everton. 2 wins so far out of 3, 4 assists for Grealish. Grealish is back, isn't he?
He is, but I'm going to answer another question that you haven't asked me, which is related to what John just said about goalkeepers.
Go on then.
It does come to Grealish.
All right, you have to go there.
It does, right? So as everyone does go player to player and you want to kick it longer, the goalkeeper with the most long passes in the entire league is Jordan Pickford. He knocks it long because David Moyes has assembled a super team. See here, there's loads of players up top. So why not just go long to Beto, who can take it down? Because if you can take it down with Beto, suddenly now what you have are excellent players all around him. So Grealish, Dewsbury Hall and Njai. So they've got these great players who can do magical things.
So that's where Grealish comes into it.
Exactly.
Phew, we got there.
So now I'm going to tell you why Grealish is doing so well and why he could be massively important to Everton this season. So David Moyes talked about how good he is, but he's even better than he thought. And he's surprised me too, because we're all used to the Man City version of Grealish where he, like Martinelli, goes up the wing a little bit and stops and goes back. So what you get now, I didn't know Grealish could ping these sort of balls out to the wide area. This is Jake O'Brien, who's their current right back. He's the centre back. But here is Grealish doing the old thing on the left-hand side. Now, at Man City, what you'd use him for is a bit like Martinelli again. You carry the ball, you hold the position, you start getting control of the pitch, you can bring other players in the way you want, and eventually you can sort of dash to try and score something, change the tempo a little bit. But now Grealish has some freedom, and he said in the past that when he played for Villa under Dean Smith, the best thing that Dean Smith said was just do what you want, and you can have some fun with it. But what we're seeing with Everton now are all the 3 players are going where they want to at certain times, so there's being able to combine well, and that really helps. So here's Grealish here. He can combine because Dewsbury Hall's next to him, rather than going backwards like he would normally, ping it in, get in behind, and that's him in behind now. It's a shot, it's really well saved. But this is an example of Grealish doing things we know he can do. He can go past players, he is quicker than we think he is. He can dribble, he can do all these special things. But also, he draws lots of fouls. In fact, in the last 10 years, I went through all the numbers, counted them individually. He has the 4th most fouls won, but per 90, the most. And
I love the way you said that, very statesmanlike.
Yes, that's right. So Grealish is good at drawing fouls. Now, Everton, one of the things they were best at under Sean Dyche was scoring from set pieces. In fact, that was the only thing they could do under Sean Dyche. And they still have that because they have height and power and aggression, so it's useful being able to win set pieces. But the way that Grealish does everything he does is designed to disguise and fool defenders into doing silly things. Here's him controlling the ball. He's going to receive it on his his front foot. Defender's going to come close to him. These are the players around him. He's got Njai and Dewsbury Hall close by. He can combine. All these clever players can do little clever things. So Everton can suddenly create chances rather than just rely on individuals having to do something on their own. So now he's got the ball. Defender's coming close to him. He's keeping it, he's shielding it, he knows the contact is coming. He's trying to win a penalty here, that's what he's trying to do. The contact isn't severe enough to send him down, often it doesn't even matter how severe it is, but he's able to gain separation, to play a reverse pass in, Dewsbury Hall comes in behind, and he hits the ball across the goal and they score here. And you can see, these are the 3 players, all nice and close together. And throughout all the Everton games Grealish has played so far, he's dropping in off the right, he's going through the middle, he's got an overlapping fullback in Mykolenko so he can come inside. It's all timed really well. So when Mykolenko goes up, then it means that Grealish can go inside, but they're getting tight together. So it's not even like Moyes doing anything different tactically, really. Sort of, but he's just got better players now.
Yeah.
Last season they had, what was it, Harrison, Alcaraz and Njai was there, there was someone else who used to play quite a bit.
Lindstrom.
McNeil, Lindstrom.
Lindstrom as well, yeah.
Fine players. Fine players.
But not like...
But now they've got... I really like Dewsbury Hall, I love Grealish, I love Njai. So all together, you just have better players. And so now as long as you get in the right positions and you're defensively sound, you've got players protecting the back end of the pitch or just make sure your rest defence is an okay situation, pretty much you've got players who can do more things and everything can be more dangerous. I mean, David Moyes' teams are always hard to break down, hard to beat, good in the air, good at set pieces, but now they've got a bit of magic up front, and Grealish could be a massive player for them.
I love that, and also part of the low socks crew as well. I don't think I haven't seen you Dewsbury Hall with your low socks. Right, Chelsea. I know they've made a whole heap of signings, as they love to do, but one in particular for me has really struck out. Joao Pedro, I thought, was really good business, and I said it on The Athletic. Can you just tell us how he's fitting into this Chelsea setup and actually what he offers them?
Well, he's fitting in very well is the answer to that question. And I think at some point he'd scored something like 5 goals from 7 shots, which arguably very unsustainable. But what is nice to see is a player coming in, hitting the ground running, and you know that they've got the ability to add goals to your team. I don't want to talk about Joao Pedro in terms of open play stuff, because I think it's very clear what he offers from that point of view. I actually thought what's really interesting about him is how he's making Chelsea better at set pieces. So last season, Chelsea were a sort of mid-table team when it came to attacking set pieces, and that's kind of understandable. If you look at the squad that they don't have a huge amount of players who are going to offer a huge amount of upside from those moments. But you bring someone in like Joao Pedro, and what we see now is that, again, sample size of only 3 games, but Chelsea top of the list of XG created from set pieces so far this season, which is, you know, a big jump up from being a mid-table team last season. I think a big part of this is Joao Pedro. Now you might say to me, well, John, they played against West Ham. West Ham were rubbish. They scored 5 goals.
I didn't want to say it, but you did.
Yeah, but I think what's really interesting is that actually we start breaking down some of those set pieces. Yeah. We can see what Joao Pedro is doing, which is adding value to what Chelsea are trying to do with set pieces. So this is the goal that Joao Pedro scores against Fulham. A few things to note. One is that what Chelsea are doing this season is they're using Cucurella as a flick-on player. Right. So what he does is he starts close as though it's going to be like a short corner, so he pulls someone with him because you have to pull a marker. That's obviously opening out space in the middle. He then turns, runs back towards the edge of the 6-yard box, and then he'll turn, and what that does is it gives you the opportunity of being able to play a flick-on, which is great because it means that either if the ball comes in a little bit low, you can flick it on and create another chance at the back, but also it's spreading out the opponents in terms of defending because you've now got other players who are looking to get in at the back post. You've got players in the centre as well, so what you're doing is creating space for yourself. The other thing that's worth noting is that Joao Pedro's position, this is when he's playing as a 9 for them. He just sort of drifts in the zonal players here. So you can see these Fulham players are all taking up a zonal position on the edge of the box. And the idea is that if the ball comes into their zone, they clear the ball. So he's just sitting here. And what he's going to do is he's going to move positions so that he almost confuses the Fulham centre-backs. But he does it in a really interesting way because what happens is that when Chelsea take the corner, this is the ball. I've highlighted the ball because the ball's midway between where the kick is taken from and where it's going to end up. What we see is Joao Pedro dropping out of the zonal players now and using the goalkeeper almost like a backboard to push off. Right. So he drops in, puts pressure on the goalkeeper, pushes off the goalkeeper, and then drifts back into this zonal area where, because these guys are watching the ball and thinking, if the ball comes into my zone, I'm going to clear it, they're not aware of him drifting back in because it's a very weird movement, right, to be coming back from the goal side into that space. So what we can see here, this is from a slightly different angle, this is Joao Pedro. He's moved from his position between the fullback and the centre-back, and he's dropped onto the goalkeeper, and then he's going to move out, and as you can see, because he's drifted into this space between Bassi and Anderson, he's able to get a jump on, and he sort of catches Bassi out and can flick the ball into the net. I've got this from the other angle because what we see here is Joao Pedro has got the jump on, and Bassi hasn't because he's just expecting the ball to arrive at him. So really good way of generating danger, pushing the keeper back, creating space for yourself, but then moving back into this area where you can be dangerous from. So you may say, well, that's just one example, but we can see that repeated in a lot of chances that Chelsea have had from set pieces so far this season. So this is an example from the Palace game. It results in a shot, but it's exactly the same situation. We've got Cucurella, flick-on player, dropping in, pulling a player with him and then turning around ready for the flick-on. We've got Joao Pedro between the fullback and the centre-back in those zonal players here. And then what he does is he drops off, uses the goalkeeper as a push-off, and then moves back into this zonal area. And then you can see him receiving the header. The ball goes over the bar in this instance. I think it maybe arrives a little bit high for him, but it's the same kind of idea, generating these sustainable kind of chances. And it's worth saying as well that for the goal that he scores against West Ham, they're using the same kind of principles, but he's playing a completely different role in this one because, as you can see here, we've got Joao Pedro in this group of runners now where they're starting a little bit deeper and they're going to attack the box. And, you know, when you get good headers, I think running into the box from these sorts of positions, you'll know as an Arsenal fan, Gabriel Magalhaes
Magalhaes,
from that sort of situation is a cheat code, because he arrives, what the rest of the team are trying to do is create space for him, and then you get the ball onto his head, and it often results in a goal. But we see it happening within the same framework that we've been talking about before. This time Liam Delap is the striker, so you can see him at the back of this zonal group of players. Marc Cucurella is doing the flick-on run, and when the flick-on comes in, I've highlighted how far off the ground he gets, because I think this is a really important thing for guys who are going to head the ball right, if you can get higher than anyone else. But in this instance, I think he has quite a good jump from a sort of fairly static standing point at times. And I think that's really dangerous in the box as well. And he's able to actually get a run on the centre-back, get up for the ball and play it into the goal, which is great. So I think what's really important for us to see here, a couple of things. One is that Chelsea have a player now like Joao Pedro, who's dangerous in the box from an aerial point of view. That makes you so much more able to create chances from set pieces, not just because you're going to be able to generate chances in a way that other players aren't, but also because you start getting these points of gravity in the box, where it will now be the case that every team coming up against Chelsea will be like, Joao Pedro is the dangerous player, so we'll maybe have to double mark him. We won't allow him to jump back onto the goalkeeper and bounce off him. They'll be aware of that. Marc Cucurella is getting these little flick-ons at the front post. Maybe we double mark that. As soon as you start doing that, you're creating space elsewhere. And what that does is it means that players who are much weaker from set-piece situations actually have a much easier task of scoring as well. So, yeah, I think Joao Pedro, by the end of the season, we'll probably be talking about him as a really important player for Chelsea in terms of open play. But I think it's going to be interesting keeping our eye on what's happening from set-piece situations, because I think he's going to have a really big impact on them there as well.
Yeah, Chelsea adding something extra to their locker here. Is it too early to actually signal them as potential Premier League title winners this season?
I don't think so. The big concern that you maybe have with Chelsea is that they've got a lot of young players, and I think last season we saw that in sort of terms of consistency. They were dropping points against teams where you would hope that they would win more. Now, often what happens with those teams is they drop deep, and it's hard to break them down. Set pieces are a really good way of actually getting an inroad against teams like that. You'll know that as an Arsenal fan,
exactly.
Right? Arsenal use set pieces as a really dangerous way of breaking open games. Chelsea also have a few injuries here and there, so maybe that could be what holds them back. But I think, yeah, what we're seeing from Chelsea now is they're just becoming more tactically diverse, as we said before. They're adding more things to their locker, to use your words, which is always going to make you more threatening, because it's just another way for teams to try and stop you doing something. And if they can add set pieces to that as well, I think they're going to be a real prospect at the top of the table.
Enzo Maresca's really cooking. All right, before we go, out of all the people we've mentioned so far, I know it's probably too early and the sample size is still quite small, but which one of these players do you think will be the most positive impact on their team? By that I mean Joao Pedro, Eze, Simmons, Isak, Jack Grealish.
I think it's a tie for me between Eze and Grealish, who both give them something a bit magical. Like Grealish will take Everton, I think, up about 5 Premier League places on his own, at least. Whereas Eze could be the thing that unlocks these games that Arsenal often end up drawing.
Okay, nice.
I think as well, it's you sort of look at Isak and you think, how could you not pick Isak? But I think everyone knows that he's going to be a good player. And I think maybe using that metric to answer the question, it could be someone like Joao Pedro, who's maybe quietly doing things that people don't notice. But by the time we get to the end of the season, let's say that Chelsea do have a title push, I think a lot of people will point at that transfer and be like, this is one of the players that they brought in who really gave them a little bit more like tactical diversity to cause problems.
Okay, well, the men have spoken.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football